More than 250 years after Captain James Cook landed in Botany Bay, the remains of the famous vessel that carried him and his crew, HMS Endeavour, has been located in the United States. The discovery announced this morning by the director of the Australian National Maritime Museum marks the end of a painstaking 22-year search for the wreck. Let's bring in someone who knows, well, he's forgotten more about this than anyone else in the country. I'm joined from Melbourne by this country's greatest living historian and the biographer of James Cook, Professor Geoffrey Blainey. Thank you for your time, Professor Blainey. What do you make of the discovery today?
Thanks very much for the generous introduction. I think it's remarkable. We missed out 2 years ago on celebrating Captain Cook because the virus came and all our celebrations planned for the 250th anniversary of his voyage along the eastern coast were abandoned. So at last we can celebrate him. He was one of the great men in the history of the world, one of the great navigators, one of the great explorers.
It's a real shame that there's this modern narrative that he was an invader or a white supremacist or any of that. I remember reading a terrific book about the Endeavour. I didn't appreciate that the ship was about the size of a tennis court and his navigation skills were as good as any modern day sailor now with all the modern instruments. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yes, the ship was about the size of a doubles tennis court, and inside were about 100 people, and in the space of 3 years he made one of the longest and most difficult exploration voyages in the history of the world. And occasionally he ran into trouble. He had one great disadvantage: he had only one ship, and if the ship was wrecked, there was no chance that they might be discovered. And so it was really a most courageous voyage, and so much knowledge was gained about plant life and zoology. It was Captain Cook's voyage on the east coast of Australia that discovered the kangaroo. It's amazing, isn't it, that the Dutch in all their voyages along the west coast didn't see or name a kangaroo. And but he was a great navigator. Unfortunately, sailing in the full moon near the Great Barrier Reef, the ship actually landed on top of the Barrier Reef, and so he had to go to Cooktown and in other words, repair the ship so he could continue the voyage. But he was one of the great explorers in the world's history.